Bun venit la o emisiune Punctul de plecare, al cărei invitat aproape că nu mai are nevoie de prezentare, Dr. Benjamin Solomon Carson Sr., intrat în conștiința publică drept Dr. Ben Carson. Cei care i-au citit cărțile, Mâini înzestrate, Gândește cutezător sau Asumă-ți riscul, îi cunosc bine istoria de viață, dar și principiile care l-au călăuzit de la începuturi atât de problematice la reușite ieșite din comun. Timp de peste un sfert de secol, Dr. Carson a fost șeful secției de neurochirurgie pediatrică la Spitalul Johns Hopkins din Baltimore, Maryland. Ca profesor de neurochirurgie, chirurgie plastică și oncologie la Universitatea de Medicină cu același nume, a inspirat și a format numeroși discipoli. Personalitate publică, vorbitor foarte căutat, autor și mentor, deținătorul celei mai înalte distincții civile americane, Medalia Libertății, Dr. Ben Carson influențează în așa măsură discursul public în Statele Unite, încât un prestigios ziar american a lansat cu câteva luni în urmă ideea că el ar putea fi un viitor președinte. La sfârșitul interviului vom reveni asupra câtorva dintre ideile majore exprimate, dar acum vă invit să ascultați conversația cu Dr. Ben Carson. Dear Dr. Carson, it's a special privilege for me and for our viewers to have you in my program. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
In your last book, America the Beautiful, you say something which is really outstanding. You say that God has orchestrated your life all through.
Yes.
Would you like to explain that a little?
Yes. Well, you know, God never asks you to do anything that He doesn't prepare you for. And, you know, as I look through my life, and I see the various doors that have been opened, the various opportunities, but He always makes sure that the groundwork is laid before He opens that door for you to go through. And, you know, He basically stacked the deck with my life, giving me, you know, one once-in-a-lifetime case after another, to rapidly expand my reputation and to give me a platform. And then, you know, the way He continues to, you know, put the right people in your life at the right time. Everything it's almost, you couldn't write it any better yourself, quite frankly. And now in this, you know, latest chapter of my life, you know, I wondered, you know, why they wanted me to speak at the National Prayer Breakfast.
Yes.
Because I had done it 16 years earlier, and I wasn't aware that anybody had ever done it twice. And then I found out that Billy Graham did it twice. I said, Lord, you obviously have something you want me to say. And He did. And, you know, that's prepared the way for the next phase of my life. But you always count on Him, always look to Him. And He always takes very good care of you.
We'll speak a little about what you call the second phase of your life. Let's stick for a while with the first half. Mm-hmm. Your beginnings in life, however, were not very, very promising. Could you mention some of the turning points, some moments in your life when, you know, it looked like everything could go terribly wrong?
Sure.
And it went incredibly fine.
Well, you know, obviously I was devastated when my parents got divorced.
Yeah.
You know, I was 8 years old.
So you have memories. You're able to understand, to live that out.
Very vivid memories of that. Mm-hmm. I would pray every night that somehow my parents would get back together.
You felt somehow responsible for their...
Yeah, of course, you feel that you have something to do mm-hmm. with it. But even if I didn't feel that way, just not having a father. Back in those days, that was not the common thing.
Yes.
And just about everybody else, you know, had both parents.
Yeah.
So you felt a little like the odd man out in that situation. But, you know, my mother more than made up for the fact that we didn't have a father there, and she was extremely caring and always asking God to give her wisdom and believing in Him. I was still a terrible student, though.
Terrible student.
I was terrible. I think all of my classmates were happy that I was there because they never had to worry about getting the lowest mark. But, you know, my mother was always after me and saying, you can do so much better than this. And she prayed and asked God to give her the wisdom to know what to do, because my brother was doing poorly too. Oh. And He gave her the wisdom. He opened her eyes, and she saw that all the homes that she cleaned, and these were homes of wealthy people, that they did a lot of reading. And it clicked in her mind that maybe there's a correlation between reading and success. And so she made us read books and give her written reports, and we didn't know she couldn't read them. And as I began to read those books, in the beginning I didn't like it, but after a while, it began to open up whole new worlds for me. And I began to know things that nobody else knew, and I loved it. You know, the very kids who were calling me dummy were now asking me, what does this mean? And how do you work this problem? And I was just having the time of my life, and I just kept going at that point, because I realized that the person who has the most to do with what happens to you in life is you. You know, it doesn't really matter what anybody else says, or does. And you make the right choices, and you decide how much energy you're going to put into your choice. Yeah. And you know, God has given us the power of choice in our lives, and He's given us, you know, the power of energy or laziness. But we get to choose which one. And once I knew that I could completely change my circumstances, and that was very uplifting, because, you know, we lived in poverty, and honestly, I wasn't all that fond of poverty. But once I knew that I could change it, it didn't bother me so much. And, you know, things, you know, I had ups and downs. You know, I became an A student, top student. But then I got sidetracked with peer pressure and wanting to stay out late and play basketball and hang out with gangs and stuff. And, you know, my grades slipped. And then, you know, my mother convinced me by doing a simple thing, which I think required a lot of wisdom.
Yes.
But I was complaining about not having all the fancy clothes.
Oh.
And she just said, all right, I'm going to take all this money I earned this week scrubbing people's toilets and scrubbing their floors and doing all the stuff they don't want to do. And I'm going to give it to you. And you take the money.
What was the reaction?
Yeah, and well, she said, you take the money and you pay the bills. And you take care of all the necessities. And then with all the money left over, go out and buy all the clothes you want. Well, you know, when I sat down and I started allocating money for, you know, food and for shelter and for all the necessities. And then I realized very quickly that my mother, with her third grade education, was a financial genius to keep a roof over our head at all, any kind of clothes on our back, any kind of food on the table. And I realized that I was being a fool. And I just turned around immediately at that point and got back on the right track, and I was an A student again. And I left the gangs along, and I left staying out late playing basketball along, and redoubled my efforts academically.
And you were able to gain once more your good status?
I was an excellent student once again. Yeah. And then I had the temper problem. That was a big turning point. I would get very, very angry, uncontrollably angry. And I would want to hurt people, and I would go after people with baseball bats and bricks and whatever. I really didn't care what the consequences were as long as I hurt them. And, you know, God helped me to realize one day after I tried to stab another youngster, and he had on a large metal belt buckle, and the knife blade struck it and broke. And, you I locked myself in the bathroom, and I just started contemplating my life, and I said, you turn things around academically, but you're never going to make it with a temper like that. You'll end up in jail, reform school, or the grave. And none of those appealed to me, so, I just fell on my knees, and I said, Lord, I can't control my temper. I've tried everything. I can't do it. Please help me. And there was a Bible there, and I picked it up and started reading, and it had all these verses in it about fools. And I said, wow, that sounds like me. But it also had verses about anger, like Proverbs 19:19, no point getting an angry man out of trouble, because he's just going to get right back into it. But encouraging verses like Proverbs 16:32, mightier is the man who can control his temper to the man who can conquer a city. And verse after verse, chapter after chapter, they all seemed like they were written for me. And I stayed in that bathroom for 3 hours. And while I was there, I came to the realization that to react, to punch somebody, to kick a door down, whatever, was not a sign of strength. It was a sign of weakness. It meant that you could easily be controlled by others and by the environment. And I also came to understand, courtesy of the Holy Spirit, that, the reason I was so angry all the time is because I was selfish. And I was always thinking about me. So, somebody hit me, somebody was in my space, somebody took my thing, so it's always me, my, and I. And I realized that if you move out of the center of the circle so that everything isn't about you, it's much easier to control yourself.
What was your age at that time?
I was 14.
You were already 14?
14 at that time.
So
and that was a changing point in my life.
Plenty of strength without God's providence.
Right. And particularly in the environment where I was, with a temper like that, very likely that I'd be dead now. But I came to understand that day that God is a nice individual and somebody that you can really turn to in the time of need. And I adopted him not only as my earthly father, but my heavenly father. And has been both of those to me ever since that time.
So I think we could compare that to some degree with Peter's experience in denying the Lord, and he wept bitterly. And he was a new person after that.
Yeah. And you come to recognize that with God all things are possible. And later on as a neurosurgeon, I came to understand that it wasn't me that was doing all these things. It was him. And I just made the commitment that he would be the neurosurgeon and that I would be the hands. And once I made that commitment, all kinds of amazing things began to happen and are still happening.
So that's also incredible. You tried to use the blade to kill someone, and you finished, you end up using a blade to save numberless lives.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
That's the way God does things, doesn't he? He uses the simple things to confound the...
So how early in life the idea of becoming a physician?
That started when I was 8 years old.
8 years old, yeah.
Because the mission stories in Sabbath school, they frequently featured missionary doctors. And they seem like just the most noble people on earth. So I wanted to be a missionary doctor. And then it changed to a psychiatrist, and then it changed to a neurosurgeon. Why
do you think you're geared toward psychology, psychiatry?
No, it changed because, I had grown up poor, and I decided I didn't want to continue to be poor. And I noticed that on television, psychiatrists, they drove Jaguars and had fancy mansions and stuff. And I said, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good job.
Not like missionary physicians.
Exactly.
However, you returned to your initial interest. What happened to...
Well, what I did is I said, what are you really, really good at? Because God always equips you for what he wants you to do. And as I analyzed my life, I realized that I had a lot of eye-hand coordination, the ability to think in 3 dimensions. I was a very careful person, never knocked things over and said, oops. And I love to dissect things. So I started thinking about that, plus my love of the brain. And I said, you should become a brain surgeon. You're perfectly fit to do that. And a lot of people thought that was a strange idea for me, because at that time there had only been 8 black neurosurgeons ever in the world. And, but to me it seemed perfectly natural, and it was.
So when you gave for your first book the title Gifted Hands, it's
recognizing that God has given you a particular gift.
Yeah. So behind those hands, it's a brain, and behind that brain, it's a bountiful God, bestowing many blessings and talents and abilities and
a very compassionate God, a very merciful God, and a very generous God. And you know, I actually believe that God will do for us amazing things if we let Him. Most people will not let Him because they won't get out of the way. They want to do everything themselves. And then there are many people who, if God blesses them, they get the big head and they start thinking that they're doing it all themselves. So it wouldn't really be a blessing in their case.
In time, you came to perform incredible surgeries, some of them involving dozens of people, taking days, many hours. That was something incredible to coordinate.
Oh, it was.
To solve unexpected problems all along the way.
But one of the real keys to the successes there was learning how to work together.
To work together.
You know, if you don't care who gets the credit, and you're just looking at the final outcome, it's amazing how much cooperation you can get. And you know, you work with very, very smart, very talented people, and in a synergistic way, the results can really be quite spectacular.
Maybe we'll speak more on your medical accomplishments, but quite early in life you also realized that you can be a very gifted public speaker.
Yeah, well, you know, that was something that actually started when I was 8 years old. And I was asked to give the mission story in the primary division. And, you know, my mother said, you have to give it from memory. And you have to give it in the first person, like you're the missionary.
That was the rule? No, it was not the rule. It was
no, that's not the way most people did it. But that's the way she said I was going to have to do it. And so I did that. And, you know, they just loved it.
It came easy to you? It came easy to do that?
Yeah, it wasn't difficult.
But you practiced a lot.
Oh, yeah, I practiced. And they loved it so much in the primary division, they asked me to give it to the adults. So there's this 8-year-old kid in front of the whole church giving this dramatic presentation, and they loved it too. But the opportunity to do a lot of public speaking came after the first set of conjoined twins, because everybody wanted to hear about that. And then pretty soon they start wanting to hear about some of the other things, and then they wanted to hear about my life and how I got there. And the next thing I knew, I was doing a lot of public speaking.
You're an outstanding neurosurgeon. You trained thousands maybe of students in different ways. You wrote books. You got medals of merit, the Medal of Merit of your country. You have incredible accomplishments. Looking into retrospect to what you have already said, the first half of your life, what brings you the most sense of accomplishment, of satisfaction, of gratitude?
Well, there's so many things that,
Yeah.
that do that. You know, I run into patients and patient families all the time because I've done so many operations. And they're doing well and they're so grateful. That brings me a lot of satisfaction. I run into students all the time, particularly medical students, residents, you know, attending physicians, even chairman of department now.
Yes.
And they say, you know, one of the first books they read was Gifted Hands, that it impacted their lives, or they've heard me speak, or they've seen me on television, and that it's had a positive impact on their lives. And I find that extremely gratifying, and particularly people who've been drawn to a closer walk with God.
You count that as the most precious thing,
Absolutely.
to-
Because,
to feel that God uses you
absolutely,
to,
to save other people
yes.
in every way, physical, mental, and spiritual.
Well, we have to admit that Western societies today are not very inclined toward discussing religious and things like
Right.
that. And there are many barriers, and you know, we are aware that all the time people are watching us analyze every word, every nuances, every connotations.
Right.
Do you care much about that, or your
I
first
don't.
interest is to tell the truth?
Right. I am very outspoken about my faith.
Mhm.
Always have been. You know, if you look at Proverbs 3, 5 and 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. And that's exactly what he's done. And I always acknowledge him, no matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing. And I'm not ashamed of it. In fact, I recognize that that really is the source of all the success.
What do you think gives a good platform to be able to speak for God? Because it's not enough to be bold. You have to have some qualities. You have to have some...
Well, you
some,
also have to have, you know, the right opportunities.
Mhm.
You know, there's a lot of people, for instance, who are fabulous singers, but they'll never, you know, reach the Hollywood stage.
Yes.
Because they're not in the right place at the right time and they don't know the right people. And so, you know, there are a lot of outspoken people, but they don't have a platform. And that's not something that you can plan, quite frankly. That's something that is afforded to you. And you either take advantage of it or you don't. And I believe that, you know, God has given me the platform that he's given me for a reason. He gave me the career he gave me for a reason, because that career required a lot of out-of-the-box thinking and a lot of courage. And, you know, certainly getting into public issues requires the same things.
At one point, you had a conversation, or I should say a debate with a leading atheist in the world.
Yes,
Dr. Dawkins.
Richard
How
Dawkins.
does it? Yeah.
Well, you know, he doesn't have much patience for anybody who believes in God. And he thinks that they're stupid. And I just made it clear to him that what he believes is also religion. In fact, it may be even more religion than what I believe, because it requires more faith. And, you know, I said to him, you know, in your belief system, something came from nothing. I've never seen that happen. I'm not sure of any scientific evidence that that even can happen. And then, but let's give you that. Let's say something came from nothing. Then you say that something exploded and formed a perfectly organized solar system and universe. You at the same time believe in the second law of thermodynamics, which is entropy, that things move toward a state of disorganization. So exactly how does that work? Of course, they never have a good answer for that. And I say, how do flowers get pollinated? And he says, you know, bees, butterflies, and insects, hummingbirds. I said, okay, I think we can agree on that. Which formed first? Because I said, according to your theory, you know, plant life was there, you know, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years before those other things. So how did they get pollinated then? And of course, they don't have a good answer for that. And then I say, well, you know, there are complex organ systems, the kidney, eyeball, the brain, you know, and, you know, they have multiple parts that require interdependency. They can't work on their own. According to natural selection, those things that are not functional disappear in the next generation.
Yes.
So how do we get complex organs? Does a rod cell in the eye sit around and wait for 1 million years for a cone? And do they then wait for a retinal network? And then, you know, I said, I don't understand how that works. Can you explain that? No, they can't. And, you know, it goes on. And I finally say, so there's, you know, a lot of stuff that you can't explain. You take it on faith. Therefore, what you believe is your religion. You choose to put your faith in man and his ever-changing ways, and I choose to put my faith in God and his never-changing ways.
Was he willing to listen to you?
No.
No.
But at the end, I said, well, let's agree on the one thing. I came from God, and you came from a monkey. The audience found that quite funny.
At one point in your late childhood, you became fond of classical music.
Yes.
How it happened, especially in your environment.
Yes.
I don't think there are many
No.
classic music lovers in your environment. And,
No, there were not. Well, I wanted to be a contestant on a television show called GE College Bowl, where they would normally ask questions about science, math, history, geography. I was good in all those things, but they would ask classical music questions and classical art questions. So I had to teach myself. And I would go downtown to the Detroit Institute of Arts and to the art gallery at Wayne State University, and I'd roam through those galleries until I knew who painted them, when they were born, when they were died, what period it represented. I was always listening to my portable radio, classical music, Bach, Telemann, Mozart. And kids thought I was nuts. You know, a black kid in Motown listening to Mozart, you know, they just said, this guy is nuts. And I even tried to convince them that the Mo in Motown was for Mozart, but they weren't buying it. And I even decided which college to attend. I said, I'm going to apply to the college that wins the grand championship of College Bowl. And the grand championship that year was won by Yale. And I applied to Yale, and they accepted me with a scholarship. So it all worked out very well. And of course, you know, my wife I met at Yale. She was not an Adventist, but she started coming to church with me, and eventually became one. And she's a musician. And it was really because of my interest in classical music that we really got together.
Beautiful. I think during your long operations, you play classical music.
Even during the short ones.
Even in the short ones.
Yeah, when the OR staff sees me coming down the hallway, they turn to the classical station. And then as soon as I get out, I don't have to go far before I hear it change.
So you don't have many converts.
It's okay though, I enjoy it, it soothes me.
There are some studies saying that studying classical music and performing
it's very
arts
calming.
is very helpful for the brain, for the development of the...
Right, and they've shown that if you take plants and you play soothing classical music, plants grow toward it. They grow away from hard rock music.
Dr. Carson, you grew up in difficult times, in a difficult environment, in poverty, You had to fight many disadvantages and obstacles. It was the time when the civil rights for the black people were, coming up little by little. A few weeks ago, there have been this big half-century celebration, and it was your time. And at that time, not huge number, but many people from low origins succeeded beautifully.
Right.
In our times, do you think it is still possible to see things like that? I have a feeling that today most positions have been already taken, most opportunities have been,
Actually,
how do you feel about that?
Actually, there are a lot of opportunities for those who do not allow themselves to become victims.
Oh.
One of the things that has happened, particularly in the United States, is that we've gone from a can-do society to a what can you do for me society. And there are a lot of people now who have become dependent upon the government. And the government, in many cases, is trying to make them dependent because they can control their votes and various things by just promising them various goods and services, whether you can afford them or not. You just promise them to them. And, I'm very hopeful that a lot of people in the lower socioeconomic rungs of our society will come to understand that the opportunities are there. You develop your brain, you make yourself valuable, people will beat a pathway to your door. But no one can do that for you. You have to make the choice to do that on your own.
Well, I think we also need to be a little cautious. Not everyone, applying himself or herself, using the opportunities, being diligent, being disciplined. Not everyone will end up with the Medal of Honor.
Oh no, well that's for sure.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah,
but they can still be successful.
That was my question.
Right.
What would it mean in our times to be successful? How should we measure that?
Well, I would measure success as being able to develop and use the talent that God has given you to make yourself valuable in your environment.
You mean valuable
to other people,
to other people,
and to the society at large. See, I think that's much more successful than if you just have $1 billion in your bank account and sail around on your yacht and in your private jet all day and don't do anything for anybody. To me, that would be a very unsuccessful life.
You mentioned that the Bible has been crucial in your early life. Have you been able to continue studying the Bible in your incredible busy life?
Absolutely. I start every day reading from the Bible, and I end every day reading from the Bible. And I read it in between, too.
This is not just a political statement, because many nice things, I fear, many nice things, ethical things, religious things are said today by people, visible people, as political statements,
right,
to push some buttons, to gain the confidence of a certain segment of the electorate, or,
right,
This is not a political statement.
No,
it's your life.
Something that I have done since I was 14 years old. Something that I would continue to do until the day I die, God willing. It just has become a part of me because, as it says in the book of Psalms, thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. He provides the guidance and he provides the wisdom for us. And, I ask him every day for wisdom. And I actually think God has a sense of humor because, the book of Proverbs, which I read every day, was written by Solomon. And he had my parents to give me the middle name of Solomon.
Yes.
So he must have known that I was going to resonate with the book of Proverbs. And also, when Solomon became the king of Israel, remember the first thing he did that made him very famous? 2 women came to him claiming to be the mother of the same baby. And what did he do? He said, divide the babies. And that's when I became well known, when I divided babies too. So I actually think God has a sense of humor.
You also are very open about your participation, your commitment to the gospel as presented in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is a rather small church compared to some others. I have in mind a person of great talent, great eloquence. At one point he said, "Oh, I would have been a great man if it were not for this small church." Let me ask you, how it is for you? This church has been something to keep you small or to help you be big, important?
Well, I think the relationships that I've had in the church, the fellowship, has only helped me to grow. Our Sabbath school class in particular, we enjoy a lot of intense conversations about controversial issues. And that prepares me when I get hit by the media. I've already discussed these things. I already have a very good answer for them.
You mentioned recently you decided, I think it was quite painful, to put an end to your career as a surgeon, as a physician. And now you devote most of your time to public speaking and trying to influence other people. Do you think there is hope? One person, you say in your book, America the Beautiful, that you are registered as an independent. I didn't know that it's possible. It's an official category. Is there any hope for an independent, for a single person? Not getting the support of the lobby of this side or that side, not getting the interest of the industrialists or the unions, to be always between the two, getting the fire from both sides.
In order to have maximum influence, one needs to have very strong connections. But the strongest connection there is the connection with God. And He is in control of everything. And, what has been very fascinating to me is that, I do a lot of speaking now. I'm in a different state almost every day. And the crowds are so large and so enthusiastic. And I talk about faith, values, common sense, the problems that the country faces, and logical solutions for them.
Logical solutions.
And that's what people are interested in. They're not interested in these, PhD economists who come up with all these fancy theories and nothing ever works and things keep getting worse. They're interested in good common sense. If you've busted your budget, then stop spending so much. And do things in a fair and equitable way. And everybody gets treated the same.
What that would mean, because everyone would say, yeah, it's good to cut the budget, but you cut it. I mean, you take the loss, not me.
Right, and that's why I advocated in the book that you cut the budget across the board. Nobody gets exempted because I used the example. I said, if a family falls on hard times and they have 5 children, and dad comes in and says, "I'm sorry, kids, we're going to have to cut everybody's allowance, except John and Susan. They're special. We're not going to cut theirs." I said, "How do you think that would go down?" It doesn't go down very well. And, you just have to use logic in the way you do these things.
That's a favorite word of you, logical politics.
Exactly.
I mean, logic, not politics.
Yeah, because that would be oxymoron. There's no logic in the political sphere because they're all jockeying for position and for what's good for them as opposed to public policy.
To some degree, you say that today's politicians have departed from the original idea, what would mean to be a representative of the people.
Yeah, well, people have completely lost sight of what their goals are, and they've become interested in how they get reelected, How do they increase their power base? It's particularly bad in the United States because we have a three-part government, the legislative branch, the judicial branch, and the executive branch. And the reason that it was set up that way is so that you have checks and balances. But when one or more of those branches gives up their right because they're interested in power or re-election, then the whole system breaks down, and that allows other parts of it to expand out of control and completely ignore the Constitution.
Some political forces say we can't withdraw the support for the needy, for the poor, for the disadvantaged. And that sounds very nice from a Christian perspective. However, is that workable?
It's eminently workable. And what I say to people all the time, the reason that churches and many of the other nonprofit groups are tax exempt is because they help people in their communities. That's what should be done, and we should encourage that. But anytime the government takes that on as their responsibility, they go broke because it's impossible to do that. So you have to, use common sense. Once again, are there adequate resources to take care of the poor? Of course there are, if people are willing to share them. And that's what needs to be emphasized, learning how to be compassionate and how to share with your fellow man.
As Christians, we find difficult to get the balance, because even in the words of Jesus, at one point he said, "Who put me a broker of justice between the two of you, two fighting brothers?" On other times he said, you have to free the slaves, you have to restore justice. And you can't restore justice, you can't free the slaves just by preaching, because slaves have chains.
Right. And you have to enact policies.
And you have to fight those who keep people in chains. It's not just, would you please?
But you teach people,
you have to teach people
how to break their chains.
Yeah.
For instance, if you look at some of the poor African American environments in America, which seem to be getting worse, you have to teach people to turn the dollar over in your own neighborhood 2 or 3 times before you send it out. That's how you create wealth. And then you have to teach people how to reach back as they are becoming wealthy to bring others along. And that's the kind of thing that made the Jewish community, that made the Korean community very financially successful in our country, learning to turn that dollar over. These are lessons that have to be taught. This is what a wise leader does. A wise leader does not say, the reason you're poor is because that person is rich, and try to create a lot of friction between them.
So on one hand, we have to teach everyone responsibility.
Right.
On the other hand, to teach everyone to give according to the possibilities.
Right, and that's the reason at the prayer breakfast I talked about a taxing system based on tithing.
Yes.
Because who's more fair than God? And he says, if your crops fail, you still owe me tithe. And
that little.
And if you have a bumper crop, you still owe me tithe. And he doesn't say you owe me triple tithe, you just owe me tithe. Because the system automatically takes care of itself. You make $1 billion, you give $100 million. You make $1, you give 10 cents. It automatically takes care of itself. As soon as you start altering it based on how much you think somebody should give, you place yourself in the position of God, and you say you know better than he does, and you don't. And that's why it becomes very confused once we start doing that.
So you think people coming to listen to your speeches and lectures, do you think they grasp it, they like it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, they come to speak to you.
Oh, yeah.
Do you see some of them, making changes because you can't reform others before you you reform yourself.
Oh, I'm sure it has a very, very
Yes.
good impact, which is why, you know, my popularity continues to increase, even though many of the secular progressives have done everything they could possibly do to shut me up. But now they don't so much because they realize that every time they attack me, it makes me more popular.
Recently, you began writing a column in the New York Times. Washington Times. Yeah, yeah. What's the purpose, and what kind of messages do you place there?
Basically, the purpose is to put another point of view out there, a point of view that is more people-centric than government-centric. And, you know, you realize that there will be people who disagree with you, and that's okay. That's fine. I say if two people agree on everything, one of them isn't necessary. and what we have to do is, you know, promote civil dialogue. You know, it's okay to disagree. Talk about it. That's how you reach agreement. You don't reach agreement by demonizing the person with whom you disagree.
Yeah, people are very used to get offended, to find a reason to attack you, to vilify you, not really paying attention to the message, to the big picture.
Exactly.
Yeah, we have to do that, always to do that.
And by bringing that message consistently, I think it can have a very powerful effect.
Dr. Carson, a last question. Our time, unfortunately, is up. You have seen many things, you have done many things, but now you look into the future. Do you have a strong hope that, we know as Christians, that it will be just God to bring, you know, complete solutions, complete renewal of society? But do you have confidence that when selflessly and logically we use our powers, we use our influence toward what we are sincerely believing, we can accomplish something, or it's a lost battle from the beginning?
It's definitely not a lost cause.
It's not a loss.
Definitely something that we should work toward. I would be delighted if Christ returned tomorrow. But in the meantime, I think, you know, He equips us and He opens doors and gives us opportunities to live the gospel and allow Him to affect others through us.
Dr. Carson, I'm very privileged to have been able to have this conversation with you.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. And
Thank
may
you.
God continue to guide and to empower you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Sunt bucuros să avem aceste câteva minute ca să conversăm împreună în urma urmăririi acestui interviu fascinant. Mulțumesc pentru dispoziția de a veni în emisiune.
Mulțumesc.
Aceste câteva minute de completare. E într-adevăr una dintre cele mai interesante și fascinante personalități. Ar fi foarte interesant, fiind de o specialitate înrodită, să vorbim puțin despre dimensiunea aceasta, dar probabil că timpul nu ne-ar permite și să ne concentrăm asupra acelor aspecte care reprezintă o valoare pentru fiecare dintre noi, nu doar pentru branșa îngustă. Am ales câteva scurte fragmente din interviu, să urmărim pe primul dintre acestea și apoi să discutăm puțin despre semnificația celor spuse pentru fiecare dintre noi.
And I just made the commitment that He would be the neurosurgeon and that I would be the hands.
Interesant. Eu voi fi neurochirurgul, Dumnezeu va fi neurochirurgul, eu voi fi doar mâinile sale. Poate că și titlul primei sale cărți, Mâini dăruite, mâini înzestrate, reflectă această înțelegere. Cum, ca practician medical de mulți ani și cu multe alte ramificații, cum simțiți, cum răspundeți la această afirmație? Dumnezeu este medicul, eu sunt mâinile sale.
Da, este o personalitate extrem de complexă care trezește admirație și dorința de a limita. cum poate să ajungă cineva dintr-un mediu atât de sordid și neprielnic la culme atât de înalte? Cu siguranță că sunt valori moștenite și valori dobândite. Copilul acesta, într-un mediu ostil, chiar începând să alunece către pierzare,
A fost la un milimetru.
Da, descoperă cu ajutorul mamei sale, care era aproape analfabetă, că are în sine niște valori extraordinare și purcede cu o capacitate de muncă extraordinară să cultive aceste valori și mai ales își dă seama că aceste valori sunt sădite cu un anumit scop. Bineînțeles, împrumutând din valorile părinților săi recte a mamei sale. El chiar spune, în urma divorțului părinților, l-am transformat pe Dumnezeu în tată ceresc și tată pământesc. Foarte interesant. Un stigmat, cel mai neprielnic mod de a începe viața, de a resimți viața, este transformat într-un avantaj extraordinar. Avem nevoia de afirmare sădită în noi, în sufletul nostru, de Creator. De ce oare suntem creați în felul ăsta? Pentru că există nevoie de slujire. Dar cei mai mulți în lumea noastră, egoistă, rapace, văd în nevoia de afirmare nevoia de strivirea celorlalți și nu de slujirea celorlalți. Pe când el a înțeles sensul acesta divin și a cultivat această relație personală și a îmbrățișat aceste valori ca fiind singura modalitate de a putea să acceadă la afirmare de sine cu ajutorul Creatorului său. De altfel, Osborne, Maslow vorbesc despre aceste nevoi fundamentale și el a plecat de la nevoile elementare și a ajuns la cele mai înalte nevoi, pentru că a acceptat să fie într-o legătură intimă cu sursa celor mai înalte valori. Și aceasta chiar în profesii sau chiar în detalii. De la obiecte foarte mici, de la împrejurări foarte mici, el tratează înțelege semnificația profundă a acestora, le deturnează. În loc să înfigă briceagul în abdomenul unui adversar, el ia bisturiul și începe să tămăduiască oameni și ajunge la performanțe extraordinare. Asta a însemnat multă muncă, a însemnat multă umilință, a însemnat capacitatea de a persevera și de a urmări aceste valori într-un mediu ostil acestor valori, și a realizat extraordinar de mult.
El vorbește și despre importanța spiritului de cooperare. Asemenea, performanțe chirurgicale incredibile au în spatele lor sau alături de el zeci de alți specialiști. Să-l ascultăm cum vorbește despre importanța cooperării, care e nu doar o capacitate profesională, e o trăsătură de caracter.
Da, sigur.
But one of the real keys to the successes there was learning how to work together.
To work together.
If you don't care who gets the credit, and you're just looking at the final outcome, it's amazing how much cooperation you can get. And you work with very, very smart, very talented people, and in a synergistic way, the results can really be quite spectacular.
Unde învățăm asta?
Prima tendință și tentație a omului este să facă ruptura între profesionalism și valori morale și spirituale. E bine, Ben Carson n-a făcut niciodată lucrul ăsta. Deci le-a păstrat tot timpul împreună și eu cred că numai valorile divine, dumnezeiești, pot să te ajute la lucrul acesta. El a înțeles că dacă nu urmărești să-ți adjudeci meritele sau nu urmărești și nici invidia nu te roade dacă altcineva este proslăvit, ci tu urmărești obiectivul, țelul pe care ți l-ai propus. Și gândiți-vă că sunt țeluri pentru o viață întreagă, pentru o existență, ba chiar pentru veșnicie. La asta ne ajută valorile divine. Pentru că oamenii pot avea nenumărate țeluri secundare, obiective, care pot să te deturneze. Dar el n-a făcut lucrul acesta și a păstrat. De aceea Dumnezeu este neurochirurgul și el este doar un instrument. De aceea el poate să colaboreze cu echipe, cu oameni care poate au metehne, au defecte, dar nici Ben Carson nu este scutit de defecte, nici Ben Carson nu este scutit de nefericiri. Cine știe mai mult despre Ben Carson știe că el trăiește adevărate drame personale și probabil și altele despre care noi nu știm. Și totuși el continuă să-și urmărească țelul, obiectivul, nu pierde din vedere valorile și din cauza aceasta are în continuare succes. Îl citește și acum Biblia, dimineața, în timpul zilei și seara. Păstrează aceeași legătură continuă cu Dumnezeu și rămâne în același timp un profesionist de invidiat, un comunicator care transmite valori unei societăți întregi, colegilor, formează studenți, rezidenți, vorbește oamenilor simpli.
Scrie într-unul dintre cele mai importante ziare americane, The Washington Post.
Exact, are cărți publicate pentru interes general și el nu vorbește de fapt despre sine, ci vorbește despre succesul unei relații, a unui om, unui profesionist desăvârșit, a unui om umil, modest, care împreună cu Dumnezeu ajunge la performanțe extraordinare. Și de aceea este un model și de aceea merită admirat.
O parte a discuției pe care am avut-o cu doctorul Carson s-a referit la situațiile sociale care caracterizează societatea noastră și propunerile lui sunt destul de interesante și surprinzătoare. Să ascultăm ce spune despre posibilitatea de a reuși atunci când dorești lucrul acesta, deși trăiești în condiții delicate, dificile.
I would measure success as being able to develop and use the talent that God has given you to make yourself valuable in your environment.
Deci măsura succesului nu constă în banii pe care îi aduni, în faima pe care o atingi, în medaliile pe care le primești, ci
în capacitatea de a-i sluji pe ceilalți, de a provoca fericire în celălalt. Cea mai mare fericire care ajunge până la urmă la tine însuți este numai aceea care vine prin intermediul fericirii, tămăduirii, vindecării celorlalți.
Foarte frumos, să repetați asta, n-aș vrea să treacă.
Dacă am înțeles lucrul acesta, că nu putem fi fericiți decât făcându-l pe celălalt de lângă noi fericit, pe copilul meu, pe soția mea, pe soacra mea, pe vecinul meu, pe colegul meu, atunci voi fi într-adevăr un om fericit. Sau vreau să scurt-circuitez, să fiu numai eu fericit într-o manieră meschină. Voi fi unul dintre cei mai nefericiți oameni. Ben Carson a înțeles lucrul acesta și își păstrează această valoare. Nu e întotdeauna comod. Presupune sacrificiu, presupune depășirea obstacolelor, presupune adversități teribile. Nu ești înțeles într-o lume care este egoistă, meschină, care are alte tendințe, alt curs. Tu ești întotdeauna împotriva valului și totuși împreună cu Dumnezeu poți să reușești și să rămâi un model. Este într-adevăr fascinant, așa cum ați spus.
Ultimele cuvinte pe care le-am ales, ca să le discutăm într-un minut, care a mai rămas, se referă la decizia pe care fiecare trebuie să o ia, dacă să fie o victimă a sistemului sau să fie unul care să își asume răspunderea pentru reușita personală. Să ascultăm.
Foarte frumos.
You know, I'm very hopeful that a lot of people in the lower socioeconomic rungs of our society will come to understand that the opportunities are there. You develop your brain, you make yourself valuable. People will be a pathway to your door. But no one can do that for you. You have to make the choice to do that on your own.
Alegere personală.
Da. De obicei, noi găsim imediat un vinovat. Este proiecția. Este prima tentație a protopărinților noștri, femeia, șarpele, nu,
Dumnezeu în
ultima instanță și asumarea într-o manieră adultă, nu într-una infantilă, într-una nevrotică, ci asumarea responsabilității, depășirea obstacolelor, ori de câte ori se ivește. Ne putem pune mâinile în cap, să ne smulgem părul, să ne sfâșiem hainele, sau putem pur și simplu să procedem la treabă. Haideți să vedem ce putem face, hai să găsim soluțiile și nu să insistăm asupra problemelor și obstacolelor, haideți să izbutim. Uneori cele mai, și asta este extraordinar în cazul lui Bernd Carson, cele mai dezavantajoase circumstanțe pot fi transformate în cele mai mari oportunități și ocazii. Asta reușește un om care se atașează de valori, care iubește munca, care are convingeri puternice, care are o credință în Dumnezeu și care face din această credință un crez, o practică de fiecare moment, de fiecare zi.
Mulțumesc foarte mult pentru participare. Am încrederea că mesajul acesta va lăsa urme puternice și ne va determina să luăm decizii și să le urmăm cu consecvență și cu putere dată de Dumnezeu. Mulțumesc foarte mult!
Așa să fie.